Good morning. Welcome everyone to the meeting of the Growth and Regeneration Scrutiny Panel. Can I remind attendees that the meeting is being webcast and I ask that mobile phones be put on silent, please. Before we move on to the formal agenda, I'd like to ask that we do a round of introductions. So I am Councillor Zarina Amin.
Councillor Hara McCarthy from Conn Valley Ward.
Councillor Tim Bamford, Denbighdale Ward.
Councillor Donna Bellamy, Home Valley North Ward.
Councillor Alison Munro, Almonbury Ward.
Councillor Graham Turner, Cabinet Member for Finance, Growth and Regeneration.
Good morning, Chair. Joanne Bartholomew, Director for Development.
Good morning, Alistair Kimpton, Acting Lead for Asset Strategy.
Councillor Moses Crook, Home Valley South and Cabinet Member for Housing and Transport.
Morning, Phil Jones, Director of Homes and Neighbourhoods.
Thank you. Can I just ask the Governance Officer, have there been any apologies for the meeting? Minutes of the previous meeting. Can we have a show of hands? Are we okay to approve? Thank you. Declarations of interest. If any members have any interest to declare, please do so and fill the relevant forms in. Admission of the public. There's no exclusion of the public items and all agenda items will be considered in public session. Jenny, have we received any deputations or petitions?
None received, Chair.
Asset disposal update report. Cabinet Member, would you like to present, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is the asset disposal update, as you pointed out. I think it's a fairly straightforward report, but we'll go through it in detail with you now.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, panel. So this is the Asset Disposals Update Report. It's part of a regular series of reports to this panel, updating you on the progress with assets against our target for disposal. As you'll be able to see from the report, we are on track to deliver an on target of 6 million. In fact, there's an expectation that we'll exceed that 6 million target in this financial year. What I would say is that the key focus of the report is as a council understanding those assets that are core to our service delivery and wherever possible, disposing of assets that are not of a strategic interest or a core asset function for the council, therefore allowing potentially other development to come forward on those sites, alongside the council reducing the revenue costs of those particular buildings or piece of land to it. It's part of a focused response, where over the last number of cycles of this particular report, we've been incredibly transparent around the costs of disposing and the receipts that have been received from previous disposals. You'll note throughout the report that there are a number of tables indicating progress based on disposals. You'll also note that there are a number of things that have been declared surplus to the council that have been awaiting disposal for a while, and there's information within the report around that. That might be because we were waiting for a freehold reversion and the individual business or member of the public that we were doing that reversion with is now no longer interested, or that matter is taking longer. Or it might be that we're looking to seek planning permission or other measures for that particular site before we move it to disposal. And finally, we do have quite a full programme of disposals, and we're generally using the auction method at this moment in time. That ensures that we get complete transparency around that process. It allows anybody to bid, and the market, therefore, the price for it is open and transparent. We do still, on occasion, do disposals to interested parties, particularly where they are abounding the site. And we have also done some best and final offers, and we have one that closes this week on Gummersalt First site. And at that point, Chair, we're happy to take questions.
Thank you. Questions and comments? Councillor Munro.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So I'd just really like to say the report is written in such a way that it assumes we're all happy with the council disposing of assets wherever possible year on year. Not only this, but some of the assets the council may state as surplus have been allowed to become run down or disused when they've been or are continue to be a valuable resource to the community. So how can we be assured that the council exhausts all other means of raising capital before it resorts to disposal of its assets, often against the wishes of the community and council taxpayers? Thanks.
The excuse me, the assets that's down for disposal have been through a asset strategy and have been declared surplus to our requirements. Therefore, that's why they're on the list. So we have no need for them. So to leave them empty, as Joanne pointed out earlier, is a revenue cost. And the longer they're empty, as you rightly point out, they do deteriorate over a period of time. So that's the process. It does take some time because, as Joanne again pointed out, sometimes these are incredibly complicated and sometimes they take a little bit of time because the team that's doing this works very, very hard, but it is relatively small. Plus, we only want to bring assets in effect drip feed, because if you don't want to flood the market, because that will lessen the capital receipts, and so it's important that we feed them into the market over a period of time. And I hope that really answers your question.
In terms of your question around capital, we have an exceptionally good track record of leveraging in funding to bring forward disused assets of the council and to update our own assets, particularly those core assets. There's a number of assets in Huddersfield, Dewsbury and Batley that have received various forms of funding stream that the council has bidded for that support that ongoing regeneration for that. When an asset leaves ourselves, should a developer bring that forward, in particular perhaps for housing, then we would, wherever possible, work with them to help them access particular funding streams. That could be with English Heritage or with One Public Estate, Heritage Lottery Fund, Brownfield Land Funding. So we do work to bring that forward, but technically if an asset is surplus to the council's own strategic or core functional requirements, then it moves forward for disposal.
Councillor Munro, do you supplementary?
Sorry, well, yeah, I was just going to ask how the target is set and also raise an issue of perhaps, land that's in the Greenbelt, where it's assessed under Greenbelt policies for housing. I mean, how can you justify that, as something that you can dispose of? Thanks.
So the target for capital receipts, excuse me, is in conjunction with Section 151 officer as he prepares a budget for the following year. Sorry, I didn't catch the bit about the Greenbelt.
Sorry, so where land's in the Greenbelt and it's being assessed under Greenbelt policies for housing, I mean, how can you justify that how can you justify it for, to sell it on for housing when it's in the middle of a Greenbelt area? I mean, who I think it's it would be to the detriment of the area, the community, the wildlife.
If the land is not required through our strategic land provision, then again it's the right thing to do to sell it. We don't forget, we don't sell, I can't remember us selling anything with planning permission. We sell as is seen, if you like. So if a purchaser wishes to take a punt, if you like, on buying a piece of land that might be in the Greenbelt, then it's entirely up to them if they wish some planning permission. Once planning permission has been submitted, then it goes through the normal planning procedure, and if it's found to be contravention of Greenbelt, I would suspect officers or the committee at that point would reject the application. But we don't sell with planning permission. It's bought as seen in effect, and it's up to the developers to develop the site as they see fit.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor McCarthy?
Thank you, Chair. The second table on page 12 identifies some assets that are allocated as miscellaneous or pipeline. Do you know what the main reasons are as to why they've been put into that category? What are the main sort of issues that have been identified as to why these are kind of struggling to get disposed of. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There are a variety of reasons. There's probably each of those assets has a different reason of why we haven't moved it towards auction or sale. An example might be some legal blockage that only gets identified further down the track after it's been declared surplus. So there's an example where there's a slight dispute over a title, which then has to be addressed by the land registry. That's out, the timescales that they operate by are out of our control and are quite extended at the moment. So that's kind of gives you a flavour really. As we move these down the track, we do encounter some barriers. Another example might be where there's tree preservation orders on the site that we've only came aware of after it was declared surplus, which makes the value of it brings the value of it into question. Okay.
Quite often the freehold reversions that we have are at the instigation of the owner of the leasehold, and sometimes their own financial situation might mean that there's a different timing issue around them, or that might move away from us. Fundamentally, the principle of this process is for us as a council to say it's not strategic or core for us, and therefore it is available for disposal and should move for disposal. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything gets to that point as fast as we might like.
Supplementary?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure this is supplementary, really. It's a different question, but thank you for the response. One of the things that we've been looking at as ward councillors with the local community as part of the Marsden Blueprint project has been the Old Goods Yards, the plot that is currently is a car park, but is immediately kind of next to the train station. And some quite complicated land ownership issues on that site because a lot of it is owned by Network Rail. So I don't know if the council looks at, for example, land disposals or land transfers that would allow it to kind of either to transfer land from the council to Network Rail or from Network Rail to the council to kind of help develop this as a strategic kind of gateway to Marsden, the Colne Valley and the rest of the district.
Thank you, Harry. There's been many discussions with Network Rail about the sites of that land. There's some quite complicated issues with some existing infrastructure. So there are ongoing conversations with them because, as you rightly point out, it is a prime site, but it is complicated. And as I said, conversations are ongoing with Network Rail about some of the complicated bits of infrastructure up there and where they would sit should any development occur on that site.
I mean, in terms of stepping away from that site and talking much more generally, there have been ongoing conversations with Network Rail on a number of sites around easements, particularly for drainage and other matters. So we do have a very good level of conversation with Network Rail. But on a particular site, we could be dealing with Network Rail, Northern Power, Canals and River Trust, adjoining landowners, PROW, public rights of way, any other access issues. We could be dealing with people who've taken adverse possession of land over a particular period of time. So there are always a set of complicating factors that could appear with any particular site. What I would say, and Al actually runs this, our One Public Estate Board, which is a board with all our public sector partners across Kirklees and links into a wider West Yorkshire region partnership, is becoming really good at unblocking some of those things where those conversations to be had with public sector partners.
Councillor Benamy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know sometimes sites go in for auction and then they're pulled. Does that have a great cost implication? They're pulled away from the auction?
No, because generally they're only paused. to councillor, or it might be that we've decided that we want to look at it on a strategic basis. So we work with Pews as an auction house. We have a very good relationship with them. The work we would need to do to package a site for auction is the same for any process of disposal or change of land ownership with that. We have a very successful record with auctions. In effect, the amount that we remove from auction or temporarily pause is incredibly small, and our track record in working with Pews to extract the absolute best market value means, without exception, we've not sold anything for at least the last 18 months that's not exceeded its target price.
I am actually thinking of one in particular. When it went in for auction, it was then removed. Now the town council want to asset transfer it, but they did want to pull it down, and it's grade 2 listed. So I just wondered whether there had been any costs, because obviously the council, Kirklees, had removed it off the auction list and then to be looked at. So I just wondered if that caused a cost.
So where we work with town councils, we've a duty to work with town and parish councils, and a duty as well to work with the community. We've got some assets in the recent asset disposal report that are strategically, we've said they're available for disposal, but they're on pause to allow the community a period of time to come forward for that. So we would always work with those, and there has been in the past, I think I know the example you're on about, but I won't comment on that in particular, but there have in the past been those conversations with all groups where they've gone, we need a little bit more time, or we'd like to explore that. And I think it's incumbent on us as a local authority to ensure that we do that. Al has a presentation later on the agenda, which is about community asset transfer, and it is a good way of establishing ownership within a community, and the same goes for town councils. What I would say is where the building itself is listed, or within the curtilage of a listed building, there's a real set of complicated factors around ownership and refurbishment. We've currently got a lot of projects on site at the moment that are heritage buildings that need refurbishment, and in this current construction market they're extremely expensive, and I think when community groups, parish and town councils understand the quantum of all of that, it can be quite off-putting.
Thank you. So I take it when in the event the listed buildings, or within the curtilage of the listed building, the costs mount up when it basically for it to be sat there doing nothing. And that's the same for any asset that we have. So we have to factor in those costs. So once we've cleared it, then effectively we're recouping that. We're not spending that. So has that been put in the tables anywhere? I mean, I can't seem to find any figures in that respect.
So the costs of holding the assets do not form part of this current report at this moment in time. This tells us the revenue costs that we reduce by, and they're very similar. But if we have a listed building asset that is surplus to our requirements and it's moving forward for closure, there's a real fine balance between us maintaining that asset in a mothballed state that doesn't allow it to degenerate more, and the costs of maintaining that asset. It's also highly likely that whatever use we had for that asset that was listed is not likely going to be the intended use going forward. And as Councillor Turner has previously indicated, the reliance is on the planning system to work with whoever the new owner of the asset is to bring that forward. But in terms of the revenue costs of holding, it's not quite a light for light on the mothballing of assets and our ownership, but it's not dissimilar.
Thank you. Councillor Banther?
Yeah, are there any opportunities on some of these sites for us to add to our council housing stock? If we own the land, and obviously we can help developers access funds, are we missing an opportunity here?
Well, obviously, Director for Homes and Neighbourhood is sat behind me, and I'm sure he would agree that we currently have a process by where any of our land or assets that we bring forward is not declared surplus until it's been through an understanding as to whether or not we can use it for that. Occasionally, one of the reasons that we do pull the odd site is that we think we might want to have another look at it for social housing, because there are various funding streams that come online both for social and affordable housing from the government that sometimes appear at a time frame after we've gone for disposal. We have a sufficiency board across the council which looks at a number of streams of need that we may have. So in particular, it would look at children's care, children's respite. Do we need any depot functionality for us to undertake our environmental and waste duties? Do we need any more sufficiency within the adult social care market, in particular around extra care, etc.? So we go through a real rigorous process of going, can we use this and does this work for us? And it's only when the answer to that is most likely not that it moves forward for the disposal progress. What I would say again is, it being on the disposals process, and Councillor Bellamy has indicated that, does not mean if something changes, we just move straight ahead to disposal. We will pull it or we will relook at an asset if the context changes nationally or locally.
Any further questions? Oh.
Yeah, excuse me, can I just add that, as Joanne points out, before we get to the point of putting it on especially with land, before it goes on the disposal list, we go through a very rigorous process to make sure we have no strategic interest in that. But we do have a number of sites already that is our land that we are working with third sector partners in trying to develop into social housing. But it's often incredibly complicated because the type of land we tend to own is the type of land that nobody necessarily wants over the years. And so they're incredibly difficult, can be in difficult places. As always, within Kirklees, the topography is not always great. So we do, it is challenging, but we do work as far as possible with third sector developers to get some social housing there. So we have a number in process at the moment.
Any further comments or questions? Right, thank you for that. We'll just move on to agenda item 8, Community Asset Transfer Update.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is the excuse me, latest report on the community transfer process and what's going through at the moment in Kirklees. I think this is a good news story. I'm really proud to have been involved in this really from day one of this policy and how it works. So Al's got some slides for us, but I say, I think this is good news. This is the council doing with and not to people. And I think, as you'll see from the slides, we've been very successful, and I believe we'll continue to be successful as we move forward with this policy.
Thank you, and thanks for providing me the opportunity to come today. I think you're right, it is a good news story. I think we are something of a good practice example in how we deal with community asset transfers, to the extent that we were invited to the LGA conference a couple of years ago to talk about it. And I think the basis of that good practice is how we deal with the community, and how we take a community-led rather than an asset-led approach to our community asset transfer programme. Hopefully that will come out in some of the slides. Okay. Yeah. So just a reminder to begin with. What is community asset transfer? CAT for short. It is the transfer of ownership and management of public land and buildings from the council to a community organisation. Assets are transferred at less than market value for social, economic or environmental benefit. And it's important to bear that in mind. Clearly there are fringe benefits to this, and we've just talked about one being that we no longer have to pay for the revenue costs of running these buildings. But that is not the primary driver. It would be quite easy for us to dispose of some of these buildings, but we take a more thoughtful approach. So the primary purpose of CATS in Kirklees is to invest in our communities, help communities achieve their aspirations and ensure assets and services remain available for the community. The current policy was updated in 2020 to take into account council priorities and the results of some of our learning from the earlier iterations of the policy. We've done about exactly 22 community asset transfers and a variety of assets. So the CAP policy was developed to support our vision and, as I say, to reflect current best practice and the lessons learnt. Developed in consultation with a variety of stakeholders, including locality. Locality are one of the nationally recognised bodies who help develop community and community capacity. The policy sets out a framework for the process, the whys, the whats and the hows. It's designed to be transparent, to guide interested groups through the process, and clearly to make the process equal for all interested parties. Transfers are by a long leasehold, and this is one of the examples of where we learnt from previous practice and moved from a freehold model to a leasehold model. And the presumption is that all assets will be transferred by the grant of a leasehold for up to 125 years. And clearly this enables any applicants, any future CAT leaseholders to have more detailed and and better conversations with funders when they're applying for funding for revenue costs and what they want to do with their new assets. The other aspect to a long leasehold is that it establishes and ensures an ongoing relationship between the groups and the council. What we found with freehold is that we can lack some element of control. So if something goes wrong with the CAT and it's in a freehold, the asset can be sold on the open market, for example, whereas with a leasehold we still retain a measure of control. So covenants are included in the lease to ensure that the asset is predominantly restricted to community use. We have a 70-30 model where we like to restrict the commercial use of that building to 30% of the ongoing revenue. And this means that they still obviously have the ability to raise revenue from commercial entities, but that the asset remains community focused. We reserve the right to use the asset for libraries or polling stations, for example. But the terms of the asset transfer, the heads of terms, do require full repairing obligations, etc., to the people taking it on. These are our indicative timescales, but I do need to say that these are indicative only, that we work closely with the groups that are taking on these assets to ensure that they have all the time that they need to complete their deliberations. Clearly, a lot of these timescales are out of our control and rely on the community groups having the capacity to have those conversations and agree the heads of terms, for example, with the council. I think another reason why we're held up as an example of good practice is the amount of support that we give to community groups, and that comes in two main forms. One is financial and the other is our expertise and support. Our financial support can be a grant of up to £10,000. Applicants are able to apply to us for a grant to fund any condition works. We offer a match-funded loan that can be applied retrospectively for those works. And there is revenue funding for running costs in the first couple of years after a community group takes over. And this is the additional support in terms of our expertise. We have a wide-ranging number of people who can step in and help groups through the process, as well as a framework with locality that they can take advantage of. The overall aim is to support the delivery and make sure that we give these the best chance to be successful. So in terms of what we've got on the agenda at the moment, there's 3 cases with Cabinet approval, and these are progressing towards completion. We're hopeful that all 3 will complete by the end of this financial year. Honley Village Hall, the Hadawi, and the Dram Centre. And like I said before, these assets could be ones that we'd look at for disposal, but we want to take a more thoughtful approach and respond to the community needs. So we're going through this process. Currently on the flight path, land to the rear of Denbydale Library and Longfield Avenue in Golka. So what are our main thoughts and the learning from the programme so far? Well, like where I started from, there's a community approach to community asset transfers driven by community need rather than asset-led. We recognise the role that assets can play in supporting our communities and their aspirations. We recognise that there can be capacity and ability to take up CATs that varies across the district. The value of pre- and post-transfer support to make sure that these are sustainable. Ensuring our policy allows this flexible approach, and that we prioritise transfers and investment through our robust decision-making. I should also point out that throughout the process of any CAT transfer, the portfolio holder is guided through this process and is able to make sure it still remains aligned with the Council's visions. And finally, I think there's just some of the challenges that we've faced. Well, of course, our economic circumstances. We do rely upon some of these transfers, taking out some of the revenue costs that we currently have, the Hadawi Centre being an example. There are competing assets for priorities for assets, disposals being one of them. Managing expectations of organisations and the councils, sometimes because of the timescales involved, organisations can become fatigued in the process, so we need to make sure that they're well supported and that they have the capacity to continue to run these and make them sustainable, and access to an ability of external funding. Okay. Thank you very much.
Fine to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. I'm just going to kick off with a few myself. So you've got 27 assets that have been done to date. From which date to now? So basically, where does that 27 fall in? When did it start?
Well, the Locality Act was 2011 when the process for people started. I'm not sure when we did our first one.
Off the top of my head, Chair, I wouldn't like to guess, so we'll bring you back a chronology of those. What I would say is that over the last number of years, we've certainly ramped up those community asset transfers. We'll bring you back a chronology of what went when.
So the reason for my asking actually was, have we always given a loan in terms of helping the community? And if so, have we ever had any instances, or is it factored in if they were to default? Is that factored in? Obviously, it's a high risk, especially where a community doesn't have the experience. So, I mean, at what point does the council come and help before we get there, basically?
So there's a considerable amount of due diligence done on a community group before we transfer an asset. The reason for that is it's incumbent on us as a council to extract best value from an asset. So if we're moving that to a community asset transfer, we've got to have a high degree of certainty that that asset transfer is going to be successful. Because if we didn't, the best value for the council would be to sell that asset on the open market. We offer lots of support. That can be officers working with the community group post-asset transfer to help them understand how they access funding. The loan in itself is for any large-scale items that are planned going through. The business plan of any organisation would have to factor that in terms of its costs and its running costs and its ability to pay that. We do look, one of the key functions, and this in particular has been a focus for both the Hadawi and the Dram Centre, given the size of those two assets, to understand what their anchor tenant perspective is. So where's their baseline funding coming from that keeps them running as a community organisation, and what is the stability of that?
Thank you, Chair. As Joanne points out, we do a very robust business case when we do a CAT, and we make sure if they require a loan, they ask for a loan, that they have the ability to pay it back. It wasn't in the original CAT. The very early days, we reviewed this policy at least twice, I think. So we constantly review it as circumstances change, as they do. So we constantly review it and bring it back. So as we pointed out earlier, we now don't do freeholds, we do leaseholds, learnt lessons around being able to for those organisations to have access to capital. So we've learnt lessons and modified the policy over the years to where it is now. I'm not going to put pressure on opposite, but it might be time that we sat down and had a refresher, because it has been around in its current state for a while. And it may be that it's fine, but it might be that we possibly need to just have a quick look at it and see whether it's still fit for purpose. I think it is, but it's not unreasonable every so often to just have a quick review, is it? But 27, as you point out, I think that demonstrates the success, and that's down to the hard work of the officers over the years developing this policy and ensuring that we take communities with them, as I said earlier, doing with, not to.
Thank you. So in terms of the assets, if the community were to take over an asset and there's quite substantial repair work that needs to be done before they take it, who's responsible? Does the council do that work, or, for example, if the community come in and then they realise, well, actually, such and such is wrong with this, who's that responsibility lie with?
So this is a much more transparent process. The community group would not come in on day one, having had it transferred to them, and think, actually, this building needs a lot of work. There's condition surveys, there's information around life cycle costing, in particular fabric, so roofs, structural issues, M&E, so mechanical and electrical work. We'd give information around the current state of that. We would also, and I think we've done this quite regularly, haven't we, Al? We've repaired something or replaced an item that was going to need repair in the next couple of years' time to move that forward. But buildings are buildings, and sometimes things happen, and that's what the loan's there for, that they can come back and retrospectively apply for some support with that. But there should be nothing that's not known to the council that isn't known to the community group. It's completely transparent.
Thank you. Are there any questions from panel members? Councillor Bellamy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think quite a lot's changed within the CATs, obviously since it went from freehold to leasehold. Is that financial support only available on the ones that are leasehold and not the ones, I'm talking about ones that have already gone through? Or is it still available on the freehold? Because I've dealt with 3 asset transfers in the past, and every one of them actually ended up, it was freehold, because it was before you changed it.
So at this moment in time, we would normally only consider a freehold if that was a town or parish council now. So in terms of support, we are always able to be approached for support as a council. That's not to say that we would be able to provide that level of support. But what we can do is signpost, and this is where the work between the assets team and the community support team, in particular Alan and Joe Dolman, really helps, because there are lots of other funding mechanisms that community groups can access that we can't as a council. One of the massive advantages of us not owning these buildings anymore is the ability of the community to access grants and other forms of donations, etc., that support their running costs. So we can always help with supporting and signposting them to that.
Yeah, thank you for that. It was just that if it's being asset transferred by a freehold to a parish or town council, and then they put in a management sort of group because they haven't got the physical, you know, the parish can't physically run the building itself, which means then you've got the complication of leases and all sorts after that. I think there's a situation where if the lease isn't long enough, you've got like a 25-year lease, that they're struggling to get funding. So you have to relook at all the leases. And I was just wondering if, you know, would the council help out in that situation, or would they still after? I don't know.
So,
it's got very confusing.
So it appears, Councillor Bellamy, that there's a specific set of difficult circumstances that I'm not aware of, and I'm quite happy to have a conversation outside on that. In terms of leasehold, if a freeholder is subletting to a leaseholder, then that's a matter for a freeholder. To do so in a manner that supports the leaseholder to obtain whatever financial support they can, whilst protecting the freeholder's own interests in that. One of the reasons we do leaseholds, as Alo's already indicated, that in 99 years plus, is to allow confidence from either the borrowing sector or confidence from the grant sector around the asset's longevity. So, but if you want to drop me an email about the specific circumstances, I can look at it, because it sounds fairly complicated, if I'm honest.
Well, I'll tell you, it's unfair to Civic Hall, because I'm on the parish council as well, and we're just organising a new lease with Firth Civic Hall, Civic Trust or whatever they're called, because they can't access funding the same at the moment.
It was one of the first ones we did. I can remember it. I have been involved in this portfolio since the asset transfer, so I can remember it being one of the first ones. So it absolutely, as you're correct, it was a freehold transfer. So, but I'm happy to take this offline and have a conversation.
Yeah. I was just going to say as well, 18 to 24 months process just seems a little bit less than what it was before, to be honest. I think if we've got down to 18 to 24 months, I think we've improved on that, because it were a lot longer than that before.
Yeah, as John pointed out earlier on, some of these are incredibly complicated, and to be fair, whilst the officers work extremely hard, there's not many of them. I think we're down probably classes 1.5 to 2 FTEs. So it's a lot of work when you start the legal process, looking at land ownership, all those sorts of things. I think they do an incredibly good job to get these over the line. And say some of them are incredibly complicated, and in essence are quite a valuable asset to the council. So we have to make sure due diligence is done, make sure the organisations that's going to take these over are fit for purpose, and they've got a sound business plan. So it is incredibly complicated, but I do pay tribute to the team who work incredibly hard, because there's not many of them.
What I would say is that we go at the pace that the community can respond to. Yeah? This is a community asset transfer, and in most circumstances, the community that steps forward may have had a small community function already, or may actually not have had a small community function. But in most circumstances, most of those people have got other things going on in their lives, their work, etc. And for us as an asset team, it's our job to facilitate that. But we do go at the speed of the community asset transfer, unless it's apparent that actually the community assets transfer is stalled for whatever reason. And we have had some stalled ones recently, and there's been some honest conversations from both parties about whether it's going to get to the finish line. But I'm pleased that you reflect that 18 to 20 months feels shorter. It still feels a long time frame for us, particularly when we're holding an asset that's suitable for disposal.
Can I just add to that? When we first started this process out, I've been involved, as I said, probably in all of these, but we thought some of these, oh, that's fairly straightforward. When you start to unravel some of the things that we thought was fairly straightforward, it's incredibly complex. Things like lift contracts, maintenance contracts, cleaning contracts, water testing, all these things came not as a bit of a shock, but we realised how complicated some of these buildings really are, and how you unravel some of those contracts, make sure that the incumbent's got the right contracts in place. So they are, as I say, in some circumstances, some more than others, incredibly complicated, because some of them have got long-term contracts with the council, so we are doing it. So it's, you know, I think you're right, it's better than it was. It'd be nice if it's a little bit quicker, but it is incredibly complicated, and we need to make sure that when we do it, we make sure it's done right, and that's to protect the community asset people as well as the council's assets.
Yeah, just to say, I absolutely agree with that, and I think asset team are doing quite a good job if they're getting them through within 18 to 24 months, because I know how complicated it is. I've been on that side, and like I say, I think I've done 3 over time, and it is complicated.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. I think probably should start by just saying there are, I think, 2 community asset transfer buildings in my ward, Slowett Civic Hall and Marsden Mechanics Institution, and they both make a fantastic contribution to the community. And yeah, to thank officers for the work that they've done in bringing that about, because they really do add a huge amount, and also allowing us, in the case of Marsden, to keep the library in Marsden open has been a really fantastic thing. I think, so the first question I would have would be about the government is currently introducing the, when we get the name right, English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, which sets up a community right to buy. I appreciate some of the assets would be not council assets, there would be private assets that would be at risk of being sold off. But I don't know if there's anything that we're doing or could do to kind of share the expertise that we've got in this process to kind of help community groups navigate this process. It's still going to be very, very difficult to purchase and then manage community buildings. Possibly, for example, letting them access some of the community asset transfer network stuff that we have in Kirklees. And then the second question was about the support that we provide to groups that have taken on a community asset transfer. I don't know how well used is the community asset transfer network. And also, I think just to highlight as well, we've had a handful of issues which have been resolved, where there have been issues where the community group has had a lot of difficulty trying to get issues with licenses and leases and so on from the corporate landlord team and also teams of the council. So I don't know if there is some work that has to be done there in terms of improving our kind of relationship and processes in those circumstances. Thank you.
Gosh, that was a lot. So in terms of right to buy, there have been in the past a number of different guises around right to buy or right for ownership, and we'll certainly take away the latest piece of legislation and look how we can move that one through. In terms of support from other community groups, we do quite a lot of work, don't we, Al, with getting newly established community groups to look at others and also going wider than our own boundary. We've got a community group at the moment that's not quite looking at an asset transfer, but something not dissimilar that has gone to other places across West Yorkshire and the north of England to look at how things are managed and established and worked through. In terms of licensings and leases, we undertake hundreds of those a year, and I imagine if you're an individual community group waiting for your individual licence, that process can seem quite torturous and quite long. What I will say that we should be doing, and if we're not doing that, please let me know. We should be letting community groups have real clear time frames for when we would get back to them to allow them to manage their expectations. And we'll pick that up with the team to make sure that we're able to do that. We can't always deliver something at the speed perhaps that people might like, but we can certainly should be better at being clear about when they can expect it.
Supplementary?
Yeah, I think just to a little bit of context around the specific circumstance, we had an issue where the building is currently owned by the community, but the council still uses, still has the library there, so it was about trying to make sure that the council was contributing in some way to the costs of running the community asset transferred asset. And while we did get there in the end, it was incredibly difficult for that team to kind of get in touch with the corporate landlord team. So yeah, maybe is like a piece of work to do in terms of making those lines of communication a bit better. But yeah, I don't need a response to that. That was just a bit of context.
Councillor Monroe.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my question is about the freehold cats. How many of the existing cats are freehold? Are they all held by town councils, parish councils? Have any been disposed of by communities, any of those freehold cats? Well, if you could just answer a few of those questions, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Monroe. What I can say is some of the earlier freeholds were done and they weren't just to town and parish councils. At the point we're at now, we wouldn't do a freehold unless we wouldn't consider one unless it was to a town and parish council. That's not to say that we would do one in that circumstances to a town and parish council, just that we would consider it. I have already promised Chair a chronology and timeline around what went when, and we will add to that on what basis that went and what is the current status of that particular transfer.
Thank you. This next question is related to the leaseholds. At any point with the leasehold cats, could the council renegotiate the terms of the long lease? Would that be a possibility? Is that something that could happen?
We could try, but clearly there's two parties involved in that negotiation. A contract is in place. It would need both to want that change to happen in order for a renegotiation.
Just one further question, Chair. So is it the long leaseholds, are they a peppercorn? Is there an exchange of some value? It is a peppercorn. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much for presentation and from the Cabinet Holder. We'll now move on to agenda item 9, Homes and Neighbourhood Service Governance Review. If Cabinet Holder and and yourself would like to present it, thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. So this is the Homes and Neighbourhood Service Governance Review paper, and this report is an update for scrutiny on outcomes from the recent review of the governance arrangements for the Homes and Neighbourhood Service. This report will then progress to Cabinet in January next year, and views and input from scrutiny colleagues are clearly welcomed. This update of governance arrangements builds on the existing structures to reflect the changes in the regulatory environment for social landlords, and also to reflect any response needed from our emerging risk register. There is a planned name change for the Homes and Neighbourhoods Improvement Board, which, along with an updated terms of reference for that group, will better position this body to provide the ongoing assurance that we require to ensure continued compliance with the regulator of social housing's consumer standards, and to reflect the transition we will make from responding to a regulatory notice to being a compliant and looking towards being an inspection-ready social landlord. The timing of this change is delegated to reflect the as yet unconfirmed final date of removal of our notice to improve. There is a continued and, in my view, rightly enhanced importance placed on the tenant-led panel. I think this bridge between service and tenant voice is and will remain absolutely critical to us as we transition not just to regulatory compliance, but also to a relationship of increasing trust with our tenants. As I said in Council last week, we need to move from a position of simply regulatory compliance to one of increasing tenant satisfaction, where our tenants are happy and secure in their safe, warm and decent homes. Finally, there are 2 new officer boards and an extended scope for the Transformation Board to reflect areas where additional layers of governance are needed to enhance and accelerate our improvement journey. So I'll just pass over to officers if there's anything they want to add at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. There is nothing further I'd like to add at this stage, and that's a pretty comprehensive review of the paper. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions from panel members? Councillor Munro?
Me again, sorry. So just a question about 2.15, the team-led panel, creating a two-way communication channel with the tenant base. How is that being led? How is that being done? Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. Members will be aware that the tenant-led panel has been in existence for quite some time now and has been reasonably successful. So the role that tenant-led panel play for us, we're looking to add to that in terms of the local area forums that have been very successful. I think Erin will provide an update on that in the tenant voice update coming shortly. It's critically important that we hear the voice of tenants, and that channels through to us in terms of our senior leadership team, Homes and Neighbourhood Improvement Board, portfolio holder and cabinet through tenant-led panel. And I think that's the appropriate channel for it to do so. In terms of the functionality of that, how it does it, it's a range of different methods, including some of the traditional things like surveys and customer meetings, through to perhaps some increasingly less traditional methods as we move forward.
Residents or attracting them to those forums, because in my ward we no longer have any TRAs because none of the residents, none of the tenants want to be want to be in it or want to lead it or anything. They don't want to have anything to do with it. So how are you attracting people to those neighbourhood forums? Thank you.
Thank you, and a good question. In terms of how we're attracting people, it is very much along the kind of traditional communication methods of using our tenant newsletter, using Facebook and other social media channels, and encouraging. I think we also provide leaflets to councillors so they can be advised of when these activities are happening. For the most recent round of events, we also asked some of our operatives and our frontline housing officers when they're out on site to deliver leaflets directly through neighbourhood doors. We are seeing increased engagement. It's not yet at the level that we would want, but we are starting to see people coming forward. I think that the true test of any neighbourhood engagement is where tenants bring forward issues, how we respond to those issues and feed back to them and let them know the outcome of the query that they've raised. And I think that is what will drive future tenant engagement through those methods. So we continue to progress it. We will look to do more of the non-traditional arrangements in the future, and I probably should say that in terms of the new year, we'll be looking to come out into communities rather than just holding the events at Dewsbury Town Hall and Huddersfield Town Hall.
Any further questions?
Well, probably just following on from what you've just been saying, and thank you very much for telling me about that. Just wondered, what do you think? Why do you think there's no interest in being in a TRA in certain wards? Why do you think that interest has waned?
So again, thank you for the question. I think probably a couple of points to make. Nationally, there's a real drop-off in terms of tenant participation and engagement. What we tend to be finding now is people are living busier lives than perhaps they were 5 or 10 years ago. And some of the issues that maybe were faced 5 to 10 years ago are not the same now. So the kind of reason for turning up to meetings is probably less prevalent at present. What I think we will see as we move into the new year, we're in the process of moving through approval for a capital investment programme. I think that will drive interest from the community, and we'll start to see increased numbers of participation as a result of that. But I think just generally, in terms of why people don't engage, it's apathy, time, and also the methods of engagement that you know, we need to modernise how we do things. So those would be my 3 key points.
Councillor Bellamy.
Yeah, thank you. I think I better declare an interest because I'm actually a tenant, a council tenant as well. You said that you send out a lot of surveys to council tenants. I just wondered what the actual, how many of them actually do come back? Is participation in them surveys actually any good? Is it not good? You know, that sort of thing. Because I obviously get them anyway, but but I just wondered how many come back on them.
I think it's we're starting to see larger engagement and feedback from our tenant base. It's fair to say that we probably weren't where we needed to be in terms of posing the right questions, making it accessible to tenants. But now we're doing lots of focused work with tenants. We're seeing that engagement increase on surveys. It's still not where we want it to be. We've got a lot of work to do. But just for instance, we've done 19 tenant-focused events over the past 4 to 5 weeks. We've had 115 tenants attend those in different forms, and we've received 342 different comments and pieces of feedback for us to start analysing. So we are seeing it increase, which is really encouraging. But we can't become complacent, and we need to make sure that we're varying our approach so it's tenants feel that we're going to them and we're accessible to them as well.
Yeah, the other thing I would have said is, as Councillor Monroe said, the TRA thing, it is difficult. I mean, there is one, it's not actually in my ward, it's in where I live, and the chair is 92-year-old, you know, so I think it does need some encouragement to get people to do TRAs and to sort of get involved. And I would say that I think that needs looking at. I don't know whether you can come up with an incentive or something, or, you know, tell them that you'll provide a skip so they can do a clean up of the estate, or, you know, just something like that.
Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. So it mentions in the report about one of the kind of risks is about data integrity, management, security. Just a question about how data is currently being managed within homes and neighbourhoods, and what actually are the specific issues that have been identified as being a risk. So is it, for example, gaps in knowledge about our stock, or is it keeping personal information secure? And how would the new governance arrangements deal with that? And then secondly, I'm not quite sure how to express this, but I think in the last, it's kind of about, I think one of the problems that I think was identified at a previous panel meeting was processes within homes and neighbourhoods. So for example, I think it was pointed out that only recently we procured a casework management tool that for use within the service. So I guess it's about, is there anything, not looking about structures, but about the actual processes that we have in place? We've done it recently for damp mould and condensation, but is there a wider piece of work that needs to be done across all the things that we look at in homes and neighbourhoods? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. So I'll take them in order if that's okay. So in terms of data security, management and integrity, the issue, so to give assurance to the committee, the issue isn't about how we handle and manage data. We follow the council procedure around that. So the issue really for us in terms of within the service is largely relates to how we handle data and how we use that data in order to drive better service improvements, so you kind of insight and intelligence approach to that significantly. And I think the challenge that we met with when we looked at this from a governance point of view is we've got 3 different systems that hold data within our service, and it's very difficult for us to bring that into one space and create a complete picture of what's going on for individual tenants, but also kind of aggregating that up into street, neighbourhood, and more broadly into townships and that type of like. That presents a challenge to us in terms of how we develop our service delivery model, because we clearly want to be as tenant focused as we can be, but without good data integrity, we will struggle to get there. So the work that we'll do around that is really focusing in on how do we manage data, how do we pull those data sets together, how do we scrutinise our data and make sure it's accurate, and how do we triangulate that across other data sets that the council and other partners hold, in order to make sure that when we say we're doing something for a specific reason, we're very clear about that reason, and it's a data-driven approach rather than an approach from another sense, really. So that's the kind of question, or the answer to the question around data integrity. Just, I suppose, generally on the data stuff, just generally, what I would say is we manage an awful lot of data, and we, I suppose, being really clear around the point on data compliance. All the issues around GDPR are all fairly safe for us. So I just wanted to check, does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, I think so, Chair. Yeah, that does.
Thank you.
There was a second question as well, sorry.
Sorry, could you just remember what the second question was?
It was just about kind of the process that we have in place. But I know you've recently done a big piece of work around damp mould and condensation in terms of changing how you address that. But is there a wider piece of work that needs to be done regarding kind of other issues than cases that are brought up with housing officers?
Yeah, thank you for that, and thanks for the reminder. So yeah, in terms of how we manage process overall, the 4 operational boards are key to that, and I think 2 points I would reflect on. Within the service, we've got a quality assurance model that we've brought into operation in the last 6 months, and that looks across all of our key areas of compliance and customer requirement, and checks and assesses the service against, are we doing the right things in the right way for the right people? So clearly a process-driven approach. The outcome of that information is intended in terms of our governance approach then to be fed into our operational boards that will scrutinise that in more detail, and will flag where they've got concerns around process issues, and that will then flow up the chain through senior leadership team, into exec team where necessary, or to portfolio holder as necessary for further scrutiny. And I suspect over time we will find things making their way through to this committee as well, in terms of just rechecking and confirming things as they should be from a tenant point of view.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think a lot of this relates to kind of having assurance that, like, adequate internal controls of that, about governance issues and so on. So I don't know if it's worth bringing it up with the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee, just so they can have sight of the issue, because I think a lot of this would probably, particularly as it relates to kind of like regulatory notices and regulators and so on, might actually fall within that committee's remit. Thank you.
I mean, my view, being relatively new to the council, but my view would be that's Cabinet's responsibility to have oversight over those issues, and we do report to Cabinet twice a year in terms of our performance around these issues.
Any more questions from panel members? Right, thank you. Oh.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just wanted to add that I was thinking a little bit about the earlier question from Alison around loss of tenant engagement, and I think it's a complicated picture, that, and there are a lot of factors involved in tenants getting less engaged with things like tenant resident associations or attending forums and so on. And I think part of that's been the cost of living crisis that tenants have suffered from over a long period of time, and to combat some of that, we've enhanced, as part of a root and branch review and improvement of all of the processes across Homes and Neighbours, enhanced the money advice team so that we can go and give people support so that they've got sort of time and capacity to engage. The other part of that is that tenants need to feel that the engagement that they give their time to makes a meaningful difference to their lives and to the housing that they live, their homes. And I think that we're doing meaningful work to do that, partly through this review, but you'll see in the next paper we're bringing the changes to the way that we work with tenants and listen to tenants' voice. I think will, over time, re-engage tenants with that process. I mean, we're a landlord to serve our tenants. There's no other purpose. So if tenants don't feel able to come and speak to us, that's a failing of the landlord service, and we are doing things meaningfully to change that. So I felt that was worth mentioning. I think one measure of that will be the rent arrears that we see across the service. So the money advice teams have been very effective. We've got lower rent arrears than comparative landlords than historically. So I think that's a measure of that, a start of an improvement journey on that part of the equation. But as I say, it's about tenants feeling empowered really, and we're doing a lot of work to try and improve that situation.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Thank you for everyone for the presentation, and officers and panel members. I'll just move on now to agenda item 10, tenant voice strategy update. Would officers and cabinet member like to present? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. As I just referenced a moment ago, this is the tenant voice strategy update, and this is a report for scrutiny. I don't think this is on flight path to Cabinet. The second report from Homes and Neighbourhoods then is to provide the Growth and Regen Scrutiny Panel with an update on progress in delivering our tenant voice strategy, including the implementation of the refreshed engagement framework introduced in September, and to outline how these updates and improvements are strengthening compliance with the consumer standards, in particular the Transparency, Influence and Accountability Standard, which sits under the Social Housing Regulation Act 2023. The report describes significant changes in how tenant engagement is carried out and the importance that we place on tenant voice contributing to our development and improvement as a service. It describes the move to embedding engagement across all aspects of the service to ensure that tenants' views and needs are reflected in and central to every aspect of housing provision. We are a landlord simply and for no other reason than to serve our tenants. I'll just pass over to officers if they've got something to add to that.
Thank you. Nothing to add, but happy to take questions.
Thank you. Questions from panel members? I think we've already covered it in the previous session, so I don't think there is any more questions or comments. No. Right, I think then we'll call it a day. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, officers, and thank you, panel members. The next meeting for Regen is the 26th of January. Thank you, everyone.